Welcome, everybody, to the Now Moment Journey podcast. We're thrilled to have you here, and I'm super excited today because I have two very special guests. Merissa Lovett, who is a shamanic coach and dream teacher, and we have also Leila Ghazal, a galactic shaman, astrologer, and human design teacher. And this is a really fun way to just talk about things like animism, shamanism, earth-based wisdom. We might go into other topics as well. But my name is Kirsten Lovett, and I am a shamanic coach as well. Also an animistic educator, tarot reader, empath, ritualist. And one of the things I just wanted to jumpstart us off, this will be kind of an impromptu style of talking here today. But one of the things I wanted to start off talking about is we really need, as a society globally, when I say we, I'm talking about globally here, we really need to work as a society with healed, well ancestral spirits and nature spirits right now, because our society is failing us. So what do I mean by that? Well, in 3D, in everyday life, for most people, everyone's aware of the problems of the world right now. Or at least I think some people are, at least a lot of people are. And I think compared to our ancient ancestors, we have a lot more problems with soul loss, probably just because of the passage of time. There's just been so many years we've gone. When I say we, I mean Western society, Western capitalist culture, which usually insinuates a sort of grow up, go to college, make money, have kids, not necessarily in that order, and land connectedness, being connected to where you live, whether it's in a spiritual manner, is kind of not really on the table for most people, because it hasn't been on the table since at least 1,000 years ago, maybe more, depending on where your ancestors are from. And I'm feeling like with a lot of the events happening in the world, whether they be climate-based or, war between varying peoples, and sometimes that involves the rest of the world too, because, it's a complicated world we live in with like empires who help other empires. But even so, when we're talking about things like climate change, for example, and we're talking about trying to, live sustainably with the earth, which is a great idea. And it's, I think, what a lot of people want, including myself. But the how and how we do that, that's like, there's a bazillion different ideas out there, and a lot of them don't involve any kind of spiritual relationship towards the land. So I think these things are related. I think sometimes we don't think of them as being related. I mean, I know people who, obviously animism is and earth-based wisdom is the last thing on their minds, if on their minds at all, when they think about, their reality. But I think that there are some people who are really trying to wake up or they're already in the process of waking up, and when I say wake up, that's been used a lot in the media in this kind of derogative. It's really more of an awareness that happens over a period of time. And I think things that, in past podcast episodes, you've heard me talk about plant spirits and animal spirits and stone spirits. These things really help us, engage with the kind of lost, everybody knows what soul loss is, but sometimes soul loss is like a communal thing, like a community or a group of people that could be, the entire world. We've lost that ability collectively, not all of us, but like, as large groups of people, to sustain a relationship with our healed ancestors. So, there's a lot of ways to do that. And I don't want to get too far into things before I let other people, weigh in, because I want you guys to weigh in. But I think, do you guys have any ideas based on what I talked about, or even just things that it made you think of, ways that things that are happening in your life that maybe resonate with any of the things I said?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. First of all, thank you. Thank you for the intro. Thanks for having me back on. I feel like I have so much to say about what you just mentioned. And I think, something just came to me that I wasn't really expecting to talk about, but that really resonates with what you were mentioning about working with the land. I am definitely a huge proponent of that, and I find that to be one of the most healing things that anyone can do. However, it's really relevant, I think, right now in terms of, um, the current situation, or I don't even like to call it a war. It's very much a genocide, but I think it's really strange to me how this, land, or like owning of the land, has taken on a whole new meaning where, people are being kicked out of their native homes because there has been this whole idea that a group of people need to belong in a specific land, which I find to be mind-boggling. I think it's really important to have a connection to the land, but it's important to really distinguish between a relationship and ownership. So that's just something I wanted to throw out there just to kind of get started.
I love that. Thank you. Merissa, I want you to jump in whenever, but I agree. Let's clarify spiritual ownership of land. We're not talking about property here. We're not talking about property ownership. I mean, for example, um, I'm a quote unquote American citizen, but my ancestors are mostly from Europe, but I live in America. So I'm an immigrant, just like, I'm sure, I don't know what the percentage is, but let's just throw out a percentage of 80% of the people in North America probably are immigrants, I would think. It's probably even higher than that. But anyway, but yet, just like other people in other locations, they have a right to connect with the land that they live on, even if they're not originally from there. That's sort of something that I butt heads with a lot of people, or a few people with that, not you guys, but I've seen people get very kind of dogmatic about that. And I think there's something kind of odd about that, because people have been migrating for thousands of years. So, um,
Right.
but I mean, I don't know if I took your point and kind of went astray with it, but was that sort of what you were saying, or not really?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people have been migrating for since the beginning of time. And, to say that somebody has ownership over a piece of land, I mean, that is just, we've gone so far away from our humanity to say that one person has rights over another person when we all belong to this land, and we all, humanity started in the Middle East. And so to say that, um, the one group of people has a right to it is very wrong in my opinion. Even though, yeah, it's I'm sure this is a contentious topic, but to me, it's like it's very possible to respect the land without having to own it, and so that's kind of what you mentioned. Um, but yeah, I don't know if Marissa, you have anything to add about that?
Well, it's interesting because my way of responding to your initial question, Kirsten, is I'm always looking towards the traditions that I was taught and trying to um, get those traditions, which are already very fleshed out, to relate to some of the traditions of my Northern European ancestors. So one of the things that I remember being really fascinated by was this story about this Amazon hunter who was talking about his relationship to the animals that he hunted. And he said, we're related by marriage. And he said that when you are related by blood, you don't go to war with your relationships by blood, but you might go to war with your relationships by marriage. But even when you go to war with your relationships by marriage, and that would include hunting or having armed conflict with other Amazon tribes, you're still related, and you can't just wipe out everybody. That's not part of being in relationship. So the way I've tried to think about this is to go back to some of the ideas about Yggdrasil, the world tree in the Nordic cosmology and the Germanic cosmology, and how the giants and the gods would have their fights with each other, but they also were related to each other, married, had kids. And it was really considered that the wars were a consequence of not being sufficiently fair in your dealings with each other, like some kind of extreme unfairness that was the origin of the conflict. And so when I look at like what's going on in terms of my country's support of the Middle East, I think there's been just a series of imbalances of power that have kind of led to where we are today. And that's just kind of how I've been thinking about this. And that imbalance of power also relates to how we interact with the land. You know, it's all part of the owning thing too. Yeah.
This is
That
so
was
beautiful. Thank you so much. Wow. I just have like goosebumps. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Because I really would not have thought of that if it hadn't been for the conversation the two of you have been opened up with.
that was brilliant. I really appreciate you bringing in Nordic, dare I call it Nordic animism. I don't care if somebody else coined the term. It's still, that's what it is. So thank you for bringing in Yggdrasil, and you made me think of something that blew me away in a good way when I found it out, because I'm very much in the beginning of learning more about the Nordic pantheon and the, not just the pantheon, but like the way they lived and what their values were, what their codes were, I guess is a better way of putting it. And one of the ones that I keep coming back to is, and you mentioned this to me too, Merissa, is a gift for a gift. And when I heard that for the first time, it was many, many years after I had already heard about the Andean concept of reciprocity called Aini. And so I had it in my head that, okay, well, you know, like 10 years ago when or I guess it was 10 to 12 years ago when I was learning about Aini reciprocity from the Andean people, I was thinking, okay, well, this must be just something that only traditional peoples who, you know, not just indigenous peoples, but people who grew up in a traditional society that was kind of not, you know, probably didn't happen in Europe. That's what I was thinking, you know, and I was wrong. And I think a lot of people are wrong about this. Like, and it would be nice. It's kind of a nice thing to find out that this way that we look at, and I hate calling it white people because that's really not an accurate term, but you know, the Northern European ideas that we have now are so far from what they really are. And when you find out that Nordic peoples had this really high, and probably still do, really high priority on making sure that you treated guests, you know, with the highest hospitality. And if you didn't, it was like a big freaking deal. I mean, and I think that that's not just about etiquette. It's not like it's not like I'm doing this to be polite. I'm sure that was part of it, but I almost feel like that they were doing that because they knew they had to survive. And it was a communal way of thinking instead of, I can survive by myself. I don't need anybody. I've got my house on my land, and, you know, screw everybody else. You know, I'm going to build a big fence around my property. Like I was walking, I'll give you context of what I'm saying. I was taking a nice walk last night, and it's a very pretty, street near where I live. And there's a lot of houses with, really unattractive fencing around them. And I always wondered, why they bother putting up the fence, because it's really not that nice to look at. But, and I get it. People are trying to, guard from dogs and whatnot. But then there was this other house where they had boarded up the windows because they were preparing for hurricane season, which is fine. And they probably left for the summer. And on the side of this particular, board that's covering the window, it says, "Don't loot or we'll shoot." And it just kind of made me feel like, not like violated, but I was like, I can't believe this is in my neighborhood. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, what do we live in? I don't want to say anything bad about people, but you know what I'm saying? It just made me think of this idea that came up probably in Europe, this idea of like, I've got my little fiefdom and I'm going to build a big wall around my fiefdom and nobody's going to get in, and I'm going to hoard everything that, and I feel like that we've been living with that idea for God knows how many years. And it's probably, you have to couple that along with the hierarchy of power, which is also an issue that comes up with when you try to do this spiritual work too. You have to kind of deal with some of the power issues that come up both within yourself and within your community, especially when you try to communicate this stuff to people. Is, they think everything's going to be structured just like the church or, some other religion. And it's not like that at all. Sometimes you have to kind of figure it out on your own, but there are plenty of, places where you can get a communal kind of instruction on how to, negotiate with these non-human beings. But I feel like sometimes we superimpose like these structures we've grown up with onto, this new way of looking at things, which is maybe not so new. But I thought I'd stop there for now. If you guys have anything.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for bringing up the sense of distrust, because I feel like that's been very relevant in the events that have been happening over the past 8 days. If you look at maybe the state of Israel in itself, you see this iron wall, right? Like there's this barricade separating it from, Palestine, and it's the same sentiment that I feel like it's that, arm being put out of like, you don't come near me or I'll shoot you. And this is of course a little bit more aggressive in terms of a stance compared to maybe where you live, but this is the reality of a lot of people in the Middle East, and I don't know if people realize that. So I feel like I understand it. You know what I mean? I understand this comes from a lot of trauma. This comes from a lot of feelings of being, ousted or kicked off of your own land, being kind of, abused and tortured in ways that are very cruel. We don't disregard what happened in the Holocaust, of course, but it just feels like, once that's happened to somebody, if they haven't really looked into their own trauma and haven't addressed that, it's very easy to become the monster here. And I think, this is something that's really important to me, because we tend to kind of, look away, or tend to kind of just let things ride when we've seen that somebody suffered. But it's important to have that sort of accountability and to show people like, maybe this is not okay. And I'm surprised that all of the empires have kind of sided with the person who is kind of committing atrocities at the moment. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to like keep bringing this up, but there's just so much that I feel like has been happening over the past few days that I feel like needs to be spread in terms of knowledge and in terms of perspective. It's like you said there, and like Merissa said as well, there's isn't a power equality, right? The ball is in one person's court, and there's no you can't compare the two states. And I think the reason this is so important to me is because I had an experience a few days ago. I don't know if you'd like me to tell you about it right now or maybe later, but I had a mediumship experience where I connected to a lot of the people and the children who have passed and actually helped them pass on. So you let me know if you'd like me to talk about
Oh
this
yeah,
right now.
yeah, go ahead. That's great.
Okay. Yeah, so a few days ago, I woke up at like 5:30 in the morning, and I felt this small child just kind of poke me on the arm and just kind of look at me and just like try to wake me up. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, who is this? And I knew it was the spirit. Um, and it started with one child, and then it was another and another and another, and then next thing I know, I look into my apartment and there's like 20 spirits just standing there, all, this is a little bit graphic, so I apologize, but just either like burnt up or bleeding or sorry, you can hear my voice kind of start to rattle a little bit, but just a lot of people standing there confused. And so I believe I've had experiences like this before where I've helped spirits cross over to the other side. But this was a little bit different because I think what had happened is the spirits were, or my spirit team was helping me look for, or I'm sorry, they were looking for somebody who could speak Arabic to explain to these people what had happened because they seemed very confused. They weren't sure what was happening. So I spent time with every single person, gave them a hug, sent them some love, told them exactly what was happening. And at some point I had to make an announcement because there were just 20 people at a time, maybe 5 or 6 times in my living room, just one after the other. And I would ask them, do you have somebody on the other side who passed? And they said, yes, my friend, or, my parents, or, somebody. And I would basically ask for the person on the other side to come forth so that they could see that they were going to be taken care of. And so I opened a portal in the middle of my living room, and then the light shone in, in this darkness. It was like 5 in the morning. And you could see the smiling faces of their friends and their family on the other side waving at them. And I said, it's okay, it's safe, you can go. This is not a good place to stay. You should probably go be taken care of by your family. You are safe now. And I did this with so many different types of people. I mean, I can't even describe, like babies, like newborns, small children, girls, boys, mostly boys, and even old men. Some of them even fought me, and I had to really explain to them that it's okay now, things are going to be all right, and just kind of pushing them forward. And I even found this little girl like hiding behind my couch, shivering, and I was like, oh no. Really just held them in that space for as much as I could. And I believe the total was 73 people that I helped cross over in that morning. And so once that was done, this never usually happens, where I'm doing this at such a large scale. And so Archangel Michael, who I usually work with during these experiences, made me lay down and forced me basically to do a clearing because I actually developed a rash on my body. And I didn't understand what was happening. Like I felt like my skin was burning. I didn't understand. I was itching. I was in pain. Like I couldn't really process what was going on. And so after the healing, it probably took around an hour, which is very long for a healing. That's usually not how long it takes. So once that was completed and he left, and the day went on, and I actually opened social media, I saw that the white phosphorus had been used on these children. And so now I understood why the burns were happening on my skin. So I thought that was really just like a very visceral, very real, very like connecting experience that I thought I wanted to share, because this is not something I've shared publicly. And so I really kind of wanted people to know that this is what's happening, for anybody denying any, the harm that's been happening to innocent people. Like this is my proof. So just wanted to share that.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's sorry, Lynn, go ahead. Yeah.
No, it's just seriously an incredibly powerful psychopomp experience. And you know, I totally believe in the white phosphorus, and the my sort of guides have been, and spirit helpers have been focusing me on the US government and our inability to learn from the mistakes of the Iraq War. And for me, this crystallized the mistake of the Iraq War for me was this idea that the right to defend yourself includes the right to commit war crimes. And I did not want our government to be assisting or saying yes to this. So the first thing, all the stuff, the white phosphorus, the bombing people on the route that they said would be an okay route, the babies, the people fighting over water bottles and people stealing water from each other, people, not being allowed out of the Rafah, crossing, just all of it. And, I didn't want to go into a place of, I wanted to feel anger and outrage because I think a certain amount of that is okay, but I didn't want to stay camped out there because I knew it wouldn't be effective. So I went to some of my spirit helpers, and there's one in the Nepalese tradition who is the Lord of Time. And because it was the solar eclipse yesterday, I was asking him in my practices to help with both the solar eclipse and the situation in Gaza, as well, and Israel, as well as my relationship to the US government. And so what I was able to do was to put out a couple of social media posts about asking people to contact the White House or their congressperson through the switchboards or through the email links to the White House comments email, just as a way to say, if you care about a humanitarian ceasefire, this is what you need to do. It's not that this is my absolute political position about this, but it was what felt like, and in shamanism and animism, sometimes it's the next step that you're going for. And for me, this was the next step, which is just have a humanitarian ceasefire, let people get water, let people get food, let people get out, that kind of thing. And let our government be connected to something like that. Let our government be connected to the world seeing that we care about that rather than we care about saying yes to war crimes as if the Iraq War never happened. And what was interesting about it was I shared that on Twitter, which has a bad reputation for being like the worst social media place ever. And I actually got about 500 people to look at it, which was pretty incredible. So I felt like the spirits really helped me and helped me to do something small, but helped me to be part of, a bunch of small people working with their spirit helpers, whether it's what you did with that beautiful and intense psychopomp or this conversation or whatever, is how I think the spirits work through us. So yeah.
That's amazing, both
beautiful.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for everything you've done for the people. I really, really, really appreciate it and just wanted to express that. And sorry, Kirsten, don't mean to cut you off. Please go ahead.
No, I'm very grateful. And I was almost I was sitting here with my mouth gaping open while you were talking, Leila. I've had some experiences not like that, but in much smaller amounts of people, like maybe one or two. And that one or two people is difficult enough. I can't imagine having that amount of intensity. That's just, I'm glad you had Archangel Michael, because yeah, it's a lot to do. And I hope you don't, I might go there was two different things I wanted to remember to talk about. One was, when you were talking, Leila, about, that this process that you were crossing people over, and it's really difficult, I mean, that's just heartbreaking work. But so brave to do, everybody who does that kind of work, and it's a very special kind of work, because in our society now, we don't really hear about a lot of it, I mean, maybe a little bit, but I think especially when the pandemic first happened, I was getting, I wasn't getting experiences like what you're saying, but we called it death pollution. I don't want to make it sound like it's dirt, but you should, I guess you call it maybe a heaviness, because back in the old days, we had shamans or medicine people or holy people who did that work in all of our cultures. They did the work for the death and the dying, that it was passing people over to the other side. And we wouldn't be in this position. Maybe we'd be in another position, but we wouldn't have this problem where people are just kind of having to learn on the job training, like you're talking about, Leila. It's like you're literally on the job training with us. You're doing it, and it's something that back in the old days, everybody, certain people with that ability did, and it just hasn't been done in like thousands of years, mostly because of the structures we have now. No names will go named, but you all know what I'm talking about, and the empires that go along with them. And I think this brings me to my other point that I was going to talk about, which was kind of tying into what Merissa was saying, which was really beautiful. Thank you, Merissa, for talking about that. That this made me think of I'll give you a little sidebar here, if you don't mind. I've been watching a lot of this TV show from the mid-70s, and I recommended it to Leila. And I don't know if Merissa, I don't know if you ever saw this. Do you remember when ISIS and Shazam were on TV? This was in the mid-70s. It was only for like a year or two.
I never watched it, but I knew that the show existed. Yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of right before, I looked it up on the internet, and because I barely had remembered it. I remembered them being characters in cartoons that I had seen in the late 70s, but I didn't remember the actual live action show, like a TV show with actual people. And of course, I knew everybody knows about Wonder Woman. I guess this came out maybe a year or two before Wonder Woman, but I think she's a little different than Wonder Woman because, she's obviously based on a real goddess and a real figure, a real spirit. And what's really cool about this is once I got sucked into the show, I realized at the end credits that they had 3 academic professors that were educational advisors on the TV show, which is really unusual. It's kind of a family show. I think it was meant for maybe kids, because it's got that kind of, or at least teens maybe, because it's a very, family oriented thing. But let me just read the opening to you, if that's okay, and then I'll get to my point. In the beginning, the announcer comes over and says, "With this amulet, you are endowed by the goddess Isis with powers of the animals and the elements. You will soar as the falcon soars, run with the speed of the gazelles, and command the elements of sky and earth." And then later on, he says, "Isis is a dedicated foe of evil, defender of the weak, champion of truth and justice." Now, I would change a couple things, like commanding the elements of sky and earth. I probably wouldn't say that word command. And the other thing I probably wouldn't have said is maybe evil, because that's got kind of a, black or white kind of thing. It's a little too absolute, I guess. Maybe just oppression or anything like that. Long story short, it made me think of, why do people turn to spirituality in the first place? And I wanted to kind of go back to we don't have to talk about my story per se, but my initial story was I needed to find a way to solve the problem I was having that my society couldn't help me with. And I think it's a hard thing to do because we've lost so much. I don't come from a tradition that a society that has a built-in tradition that's still strong of ancestral ways that are, you know, reciprocal with the earth. I can do that. And I've had to learn from other traditions, and I continue to learn from other traditions and see like Merissa said, the similarities between what our people did, the European people did, prior to, having their traditions taken away from them as well. But I think the reason why people keep coming back to it is like agency of like, you're not finding answers for your own life, and you have to seek a spirit or spirits to help you with a problem, or something happens from the spirit world, like what Leila was talking about and what, Marissa's talked about too. And where you're like, okay, well, wait a minute, I need help navigating this in a way that's gonna, make me healthy and, and not be traumatized by it. But I also wanted to mention that I thought this Isis character and the things that they mentioned that I just read to you, the fact that she is associated with fighting for truth and justice, or defending truth and justice, and she also summons or works with the elements. I don't want to say it's a domination thing because it's not. That would be a very 21st century way of looking at it, or 20th century way of looking at it. But to work with the elements or the land. And this is sort of like what I'm trying to get at today is human people in 21st century are still finding a way that they can to find balance in both their own life and in the world we live in by seeking out the ancient ways wherever they come from. And it's a difficult thing to do, especially if you don't come from any tradition. If you have a built-in tradition with everything written out for you or orally transmitted to you, you're a lucky person. Most people don't have that. And, this requires a lot of, like we said, on the job training, and also, just study and practice. But one of the things I also wanted to mention is also the duality, not duality, but multi-level aspect of this kind of sacred activism that we're talking about too, because I'm trying to talk about maybe 2 or 3 things at the same time, which is probably a little difficult to do. But this sacred activism part is, for example, when Merissa was talking about calling the White House, and and also working with time spirits, which is super, super awesome. One of the things I did that I actually learned from her is I work with Tyr, and it's really pronounced Tyr probably, because he's kind of the moderator of justice as well. And so I would light a candle with his rune carved into it, and I would try to think of the people, in Gaza, and I've used that also in other situations, for example, with unions in this country, that the working people, whether it's in this country or anywhere else in the world, that they be treated with respect and dignity and fairness. And that's an ongoing problem, as well as what's going on in Gaza. So I'm going to leave it there and see if you guys have anything.
I wanted to say thank you so much for bringing up that show and telling me about it. It's really super wholesome and sweet, and I recommend anybody who wants to kind of get in touch with that era or that period to watch it. But also thank you so much for your acknowledgement of my experience. And it really is something that is learned on the job. I mean, there's no instructions. And I definitely, wish I had some sort of instruction manual on how to do all these things. But this was one of the missions that I was actually chosen for, that I didn't actually volunteer for, at least consciously in this lifetime. But I also wanted to thank you for bringing up that first, and reading that about the show, about Isis and how she's being described, because I've worked with her for a few years, and I didn't realize, all the things that you were mentioning, because I guess she works through me, and so I do work with the elements, I do work with animals, I do work with the sense of justice, and speaking for the voiceless is such a big part of my identity. And so it's almost like this was kind of a blind spot before you mentioned it, so I really appreciate you bringing that up. And I also want to thank you, Merissa, for also teaching me about how to work with Tyr, because I definitely needed help this week to try to really educate a lot of people on what's happening in the Middle East. And I guess I just wanted to bring up one more thing about my experience, especially because I was working so closely with ISIS. I actually infused some of my channelings from her into a Lemurian quartz. And the evening that I was asking for help, I remember looking at the crystal and it just shining like a bright, bright white light, which has never happened. And so I really felt comfort in knowing that she was there, and the angelics were also present in helping us all deal with this. So I think we're all kind of connecting with the spirits to deal with this in different ways. But I did also want to ask you both a question, I think because you have some experience with working with animals. I mean, I know around eclipses, the animals kind of go a little crazy, but I've had this mouse that has just been running around in the apartment, and I've never had an issue with mice in my entire life. And my partner has been here for almost 13 years, probably seen a mouse one time. But this mouse literally attacked me. And not really attacked me, I'm sorry, I don't want to put that onus on the mouse, but basically did like a targeted boop on my foot with its snout yesterday, or the Friday the 13th. And I was so confused. I'm just like, I know the animals are trying to tell me something, but I don't know what they're trying to tell me. So I don't know if you have any insight on that, or what that what may be happening. Maybe they're in distress and are pushing us and are telling us they're, also fighting for peace. Like, what are we doing as humanity? Maybe it's like a wake up call, but I'm really curious to hear what you both have to say about this.
Merissa, do you mind if I let you answer?
Usually, like, okay, I'm not the kind of person who usually does it's a mouse and mouse means this kind of interpretation. Like, usually for me, in my life, when there are animals in the house, there's like one of two things. Like, they're there comforting me or trying to get my attention, or they're telling me something's really badly out of balance in the house. So sometimes I can tell it's because the boundaries in the house aren't holding. I need to do some work in the house. And other times it feels like they're saying, we're with you. Like, there was one time when there's a native gecko species in Florida, and it came into the house during this really bad storm. And it was just kind of there in my bedroom, in the place where I do a lot of my my spiritual work, kind of just saying, hi, we're here, and then just disappeared and never saw it again. So with your mouse, what I feel for me is that it's trying to get your attention somehow. And I think it's trying to tell you maybe not to leave out the animal kingdom. And maybe there's a lot of suffering happening to the animals in Gaza too. But I don't know about that.
That's it.
Yes,
That's it.
actually. Wow.
That's the
Wow.
message. I knew once I heard her say it, this is how I work. I can hear it in the voice. So I knew that was it. I mean, I think all of you, what you said beforehand is definitely applicable, but that last part, if you want to know the number one thing, that's it. So yeah.
Because I remember when Kirsten and I, there was a storm, I can't remember which storm it was. It was a particularly bad storm. And we spent a lot of time doing ceremonies like to harmonize this with the spirits of the land. And a lot of what we were doing, Kirsten was sort of guiding me because she's got a gift for this, you know, as you do. And she was feeling into like the passing of a lot of the animals. Like there had been whole groups of cattle and horses that couldn't get into a barn and they died from the winds and the rain and stuff like that. So it was stuff like that.
Yeah, it's awful. I don't like I feel like I need to talk about it more, but I think that the thing I get most frustrated about is, you know, especially with climate change and the destruction of land and trees in our neighborhood or in our town or in our state, or the 8 million fish that, you know, arrive on the shore dead, the dolphins, you know, that get bleached from the heat because we're overheating the planet, and we know exactly who's doing it, and they won't fucking, sorry, I just swore, but that's part of the, you know, they won't put these people in jail. Pardon me for swearing, but you know, but they get into my nightmares. And, you know, I think if everybody, I don't wish this on anybody, but I think if more people could actually feel the not so great effects of death of our environment, and whether it's people, plants, you know, animals, and of course the three of us, I'm preaching to the choir because we do all feel that. But I think if the world outside, if they would actually physically have a hard time sleeping at night, maybe they'd be a little more, you know, motivated to, you know, interact with the spirit world in a way that we do. That's my crabby, you know, upset voice talking. But every once in a while, I think that sometimes it's a gift to have this ability, but it's a motivating factor too, because you want your sleep life to be better, and your home, you know, and there to be peace, you know, whether it's among the animals or the people or whoever. And obviously when something really traumatic happens, that's the forefront. But yeah, even a storm, you know, can really, it wreaks havoc. I'm still feeling effects from the last storm that ripped through here. Luckily it's not as bad as the one last year, at least for us, but it tears up the even the energetic fabric of balance. The other thing that gets affected is when people come in here, like developers, and they just hack apart the we've got an airport near us, and they've been tearing down trees there. That's about, you know, I don't know, 3 or 4 miles away from us. And they tear down these old trees. And, you know, people always talk about, oh, plant a tree. I wish they'd just keep the old trees where they are. Planting trees is great. New trees, that's fine. But it would be nice to see a movement of people trying to preserve the old trees and leaving the old trees alone, you know, instead of, oh, we'll just plant a bunch of new trees. No, you know, you've, so it's, and why do I feel that way? Because these people are my friends. The trees are my friends. The little animals that come to you, you know, maybe you're not best friends with the mouse, but you're friends with animals, you know, and plants and stones and whatnot. These are relationships, and they're not, there's no hierarchy, you know, in terms of which one is more important, but they are important to the point where you can feel when they're gone or when they're with you, or, you know. So I think maybe it was good for me to, you know, go through a little bit of a crabby rant to get to a point where I could say it's important to have these relationships so that you can feel the upside of it, you know, because there is an upside to it. And I just wanted to say how thankful I am for you guys for sharing all of your experiences today. But I wanted to give you guys a chance to, if you want anything else to say, otherwise I could maybe just talk a little bit about what you guys could take the reins and talk a little bit about what you're doing in terms of your business and whatnot.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much for to both of you for giving me that interpretation, and it feels like it hits home. It's so accurate. It feels super accurate, and I just wanted to let you know that I've actually confirmed after that experience what you were saying about the fact that there has been a shelter in the north of Gaza that actually allowed a lot of the animals free in order to take them to the south. And so that was 100% what was happening. A lot of them were actually getting hurt. And so there was a huge push to let them free. I can send you the video if anyone's interested. But you could see all the
Sure.
animals sort of migrating south, which I thought was a really good move. And so and the thing is, I really don't dislike the mouse. The mouse is my friend, and I really wish I could have more of a relationship with it. It's just we both startle each other because it's
Yeah.
so fast. Um, it's just like there's like it startles me, I startle it, so it's a complicated relationship. But I do agree that I think it's advocating for peace for the animals and for the humans, and I really don't see them as enemies. I see them as friends, and I've been joking about that for a week. I'm like, oh, where's our mouse friend? I miss my mouse friend.
Aw.
Yeah, so, but thank you both so much for confirming this. It really means a lot. And I'm really glad that we have this space to communicate about all of these important things. For me personally, I've just been completely consumed by what's happening in the Middle East. I speak about it very vocally on my personal account. Happy to share that if anyone's interested in following along. Otherwise, I believe you have my Galactic Blueprint account where that hasn't been very active lately. I've just been kind of working on memes and writing courses and things like that, but that's kind of been on hold for the moment. So I don't really have anything current other than what's happening right now until there's a ceasefire. And then I guess I give the mic over to Merissa if you want to let us know what you're doing.
Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing these really powerful experiences that that a person can have when they have a strong relationship with the spirits. And especially Leila, this psychopomp experience you had was really just really visceral and powerful, and thank you for sharing it. For
Thank
myself,
you.
yeah, and so I'm really feel honored that I could be on this talk with both of you. If you want to follow me on Instagram, that's a place where you can find my bio that has pretty much a link to everything I do. It's Instagram and this is all small letters, celestial_tree. And the main thing I'm working on right now is the Patreon that Kirsten and I share. I'm teaching a class called Dreaming in the Nine Worlds. We have a couple of more months left. And I'm also going to be leading a type of psychopomp ritual next week with working with the goddess Freya, who is my matron and who knows a lot about working with the dead. And also she started out her time in the myths as being a hostage after a very bitter war. So she teaches me a lot about that. So if you're interested in being part of it, anyone who joins the Patreon can be part of that. Thanks.
Thank you both. I'm going to give a few more details about that. Marissa's offering this for the Pleiadians, which is the level at $1 per month that we have at the Patreon. That's www.patreon.com/shamanic earth medicine. And we have 2 other levels that you can join at $5 a month. And that is usually where we have the monthly ceremony on Zoom, and it's like a different ceremony because we alternate between Merissa and I. And they've sometimes been like shamanic journeys, or sometimes they're candle ceremonies, or in this case, Merissa will be doing a wild hunt ceremony. But that she's doing a special this week for the $1 per month Pleiadian level, so that they can experience this, because it's a very special ceremony, as she explained. And speaking of, before I get back to what I was going to say about what I'm doing, maybe in the future we could do an Isis Froya kind of showcase. That would be kind of fun, or if you guys are interested. But I did wanted to say that the Patreon is where you can catch both of us, and we both do video trainings, as well as conduct ceremonies, and there's several other benefits you get from that. But I also wanted to mention my the quiz, which I'm going to put on. Maybe I'll try and talk about it a little bit more next time. But it's an "Are you an animal, plant, or stone spirit archetype" quiz, and I'll put that. It's a free quiz, and I'll put that link on the show notes, on the description, as well as Merissa's and Leila's information, so you can find them. And by the way, I've taken classes from both of them, and they're amazing teachers, facilitators, ritualists, and such. So I highly recommend them both. And I just wanted to say, I'm so honored that both of you shared so much, and it means the world to me. And I hope that everyone who's listening stays safe and well. And I hope that you know how much I appreciate everyone listening as well. But I hope that we can all connect again. And thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.